Hello everyone. So right away before we start this video, I need to do a very big disclaimer. And I've never done a disclaimer like this before, and the only reason I'm doing this disclaimer is because I'm afraid that certain people will make inferences when they listen to this video, and I just don't want to deal with it. That might not happen, that might not be the case. People might not make these inferences or these assumptions, but on the off chance that somebody will, maybe I'm being overly paranoid about this, but I just want to make it very clear to everyone where I stand on certain issues. Now, I have a rule for myself, and the rule is this: I reserve the right to not have an opinion upon issues that I do not feel sufficiently educated. If I don't know enough about something, I'm not going to have an opinion about it, because I don't feel like I know enough about it to have an opinion. And for those of you who watched the Addy Ads interviews, I did 3 of them with him. 2 of them are up on my site, and his, I think, got taken down. So, I don't know which of the 3 interviews it was. It might be one of the 2 that I've got up on my channel. But at one point he asked me about coronavirus. And I told him, I plead the fifth. I don't have anything to say. The reason for that is I don't really feel like I know enough about coronavirus to have a very strong opinion about coronavirus. And that was then, and honestly, that's even today. I'm still learning about coronavirus. So do I have a very strong opinion about it? No, I really don't. If you ask me about my opinion about it, I really don't have one. You know, I don't. I understand a lot of people do have strong opinions about coronavirus these days. I'm not one of them. I've been interested in other things. I've been going through the motions. I've been getting through my days. I do not have strong opinions about it. And I don't feel particularly well read on it, so I don't feel like any opinion that I give on the matter would be well informed, and it might not actually be a realistic reflection of the views that I would hold if I took the time to read about it. So I don't have an opinion, and I reserve the right to not have an opinion. And this goes for a lot of things. And one of those things is racial issues. I do not feel sufficiently well read on racial issues to have an opinion. And so I don't. I don't talk about it because I don't know enough about it to say anything particularly intelligent about it. And you might think, okay, well, just because you don't talk about it doesn't mean you don't have opinions on it. It's like, well, that's true about some things, but when it comes to race, I really just don't have opinions. I grew up in a very monochromatic town, in a very monochromatic, very isolated part of the world. And so race wasn't as much of an issue as you would expect it to be because there just wasn't that much diversity there. There wasn't a lot of race to cause any kind of racial tension to begin with. There was a little bit, and I had some experiences with it, and I could tell you stories about it. I'd be happy to make a video for you guys about my racial experiences and my own personal family's ethnic experiences. But, I mean, honestly, I was one of the darkest things in that town, so, I mean, that's it. I don't have enough experience or enough understanding to say anything. And so I just don't hold an opinion. I don't know it well enough. It's like if you ask me my opinion about cars. You know, which is better, a Ford or a Honda? I don't know. They both go vroom, and they both take you from point A to point B, don't they? So why should I have an opinion? I don't know enough about them. I don't know enough about the workings of the engine. I don't know enough about the quality of the construction of the car. I don't know enough about the design. I know that a car gets you from one place to another, and that's all I know. And the same can be said of me and racial issues. I just don't know. And so I've been watching some videos. I'm going to do a review of one of them, I think, sometime soon. And there's this tendency to do this whole guilt by association thing. Like if you listen to somebody or you consume their videos, you watch their material, then you must agree with them on everything. And I think that's a very dangerous assumption to make about people. So with that out of the way, I would like to discuss an article that I read by Dr. Peter Frost. I believe he is a professor of anthropology in Canada. I don't remember where. I don't remember the university. I'm very sorry. And I've got a cat meowing at me. Hold on. But anyway, he wrote this article, and it was fascinating. I saw some of his writing on this idea a while ago, and I stumbled across it entirely by accident. Somebody had a post that was interesting looking, like it was an interesting thumbnail. I clicked on it and it was fascinating. I was like, I want to talk about this. The problem is, Peter Frost talks about race, and I don't want to talk about race because race is one of those issues, like it's extremely inflammatory, and I don't know enough to say anything intelligent about it, and that's a bad combination. Like, if you don't know something, and on top of that, it's very liable to get everybody angry, if you say anything, it's going to blow up in your face. Like, it's like dealing with... You really just rocked my whole camera. You are a fat kitty. It's like dealing with, you know, with explosive, flammable liquids. It's like, if you don't know how to handle the chemical, don't handle the chemical. So, I mean, I don't know what Peter Frost has to say. Dr. Frost, I don't know if it's Dr. I assume it's Dr. I can't remember. Everything he's got written out is written as Peter Frost, so I don't really know. But, I mean, I don't know what he has to say about race. I do not know. I don't care to know. That's not my area of interest. I'm interested in human sexual selection. So of his stuff that I've read, what I've read has been about human sexual selection. Race, I don't know, and I don't care. And that's, a lot of people might say that's horribly entitled of me. They might say that's horribly ignorant of me. It is ignorant of me, but I can't know everything. I can't. There's no way that any one human being can know all the information that is out there in the world. There's too much information. And so I've just been kind of running around willy-nilly because I'm a housewife and I'm trying to keep myself from getting bored. And I've been reading anything that interests me and anything that really captures my attention. And this definitely captures my attention. The rest of his work, the stuff on racial issues, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he says some really good stuff. Maybe he doesn't. I do not know. But this particular article is fascinating. And it's been fascinating, and it's been tingling at the back of my imagination for quite some time. And it's like, I want to talk about this someday. And for a long time I was like, no, because of the racial issues, you don't want to get in there, you don't want to go there. Screw it, I'm going to talk about it. This is fascinating. So he writes this article, and I'm going to leave a link below, and I really, really hope you guys take the time to read the article. I feel like it's so dense and so, like, it's just, it's interesting. Like, he considers a lot of things, he asks a lot of questions, he argues with his own argument and supplies supporting arguments for his argument that are just fascinating. There's more in there than I can cover in one video, and I don't want to just read the article out loud to you. So I'm going to take, just kind of, I'll skim off the surface, and I really strongly encourage you guys to read the article. But I want you to imagine that we're all a bunch of scientists in lab coats, which I definitely am not a scientist, but imagine that we were. And imagine that we were doing an experiment on early humans, the way that scientists in lab coats do experiments on rats. And we take a small cluster of early humans, and we move them to a very inhospitable environment, a very cold, barren, unfriendly place for human beings to live. There's not a lot of vegetation, so early hunter-gatherers can't really do so much of the gathering part of that whole hunter-gatherer combo. They have to rely on hunting and meat, whatever meat they can get. There's a lot of big game out, but you have to travel pretty far to get to it. And so the hunters would go out and leave the women behind, and they'd hunt for big game, and they'd have to travel long distances to get to the big game. It was very dangerous, and a lot of hunters died. Now, you take these hunters and you bring them back home with whatever meat they've managed to gather, and resources are scarce. It's very barren. It's very inhospitable. And there are only so many hunters who made it out alive. Now, people tend to be born roughly 50-50. I think there's slightly more boys than girls when it comes to birth rate, but generally it's roughly even. But if you've got a bunch of hunters who are all dying off in the cold while they're out hunting for this big game in order to get food for the tribe, then you've got a problem. And now there are more women than there are men. Now, in warmer, more hospitable climates or parts of the world, that wouldn't be a problem. That generally isn't a problem. If there are more women than there are men, the men just start up a harem. They take 3 wives or 12 wives or however many wives they want, and they just kind of support all the wives, and they father lots and lots of children. And so the men who die out, you know, they're dead, they're gone. It was very unfortunate for them. But the guys who survive, oh, you know, they spread their seed far and wide. They're very genetically successful. That's all good and well for them. But in this cold, inhospitable environment that we're experimenting on people with, there just weren't enough resources for a harem. There weren't enough resources to support multiple wives and all the children that might be produced by them. There was enough for about 1 wife per man. And so men, they had the pick of the litter. You know, they could pick any wife they wanted. They couldn't have more than 1, really. They couldn't support many wives. But they could pick any wife they wanted, because there were way more women than there were men. And so women were suddenly thrust into this hyper-competitive sexual market, which created some very interesting results. And so this is what Peter Frost's article is about. The interesting results, the evolutionary things that can happen when women are living in a hyper-competitive sexual market. And those things would be unique skin colors, unique hair colors, and unique eye colors. The emergence of blue eyes, you know, as a way of visually attracting the attention of potential mates. And I looked at this and I was like, this is fascinating because it sounds so true to human nature. You know, up until this point, I don't know what you guys' biology lessons were like, or history lessons or whatever. I remember when I was in school, it was one of those deals like, yeah, some human beings, some like prehistoric human hunter-gatherers, they sort of migrated up north into the kind of northern European area, and then they sort of just turned white. We think it might have something to do with like melanin and sunlight and vitamin D and stuff. That was what we learned. Like it was like a 2-sentence paragraph in a textbook, and that was it. And, you know, I was going along with that. Like, that was the standard knowledge. And I think that still is the standard knowledge to this day. But if you're looking for an explanation that really makes sense, and I'm not saying that this is the explanation, I don't know. But this is an explanation that very, very firmly captures the nature of human sexual selection. So even if he's wrong, it's still extremely illustrative, of human sexual behavior. And so it's fascinating in that sense. And I was reading through this and I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what, I sincerely wish I had a real life modern example of this process that I could show you guys, that I could point out to you and say, look, here is how it happens in real time. And I don't have anything like that. I was like, oh, no, how would I illustrate that? And I was thinking about that movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it, Memoirs of a Geisha. I think it's more of a girl movie, but if you do take the time to watch it, it can be rather entertaining. And the story, it's about a lot of stuff, but one of the interesting points of it is that the girl, the main character who becomes a geisha, she starts out as a little orphan girl. She and her sister, they're both orphans. Now she has a genetic mutation that gives her blue eyes. And this is a genetic mutation that occurs throughout the world. Asian people occasionally have this genetic mutation. South African people have this genetic mutation, or South American people, sorry. South American people have this genetic mutation sometimes. North American people, like North American Native Americans, have this genetic mutation. African people have this genetic mutation. Like it occurs. It occurs randomly every once in a while, very, very rarely throughout the world. Extremely rare, but it does happen. And so the story in Memoirs of a Geisha is that this little girl had this mutation. She and her sister, being orphans, they're taken to the city and they're sold because nobody knows what to do with them and nobody really wants them, and so they're unwanted children. And unwanted children in older times generally had a very rough time of it. And so the sister with the blue eyes, she's bought by a I forget what they're called, a geisha house. I can't remember. But they purchase her. They take her because she's got striking blue eyes. Her sister, who does not have the striking blue eyes, is sold to a brothel and ultimately runs away and is never seen or heard from again. But the story is partially, and I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but it's partially about how this young girl with this striking physical feature um, garners power for herself and establishes herself in the geisha industry as you know, as a person of considerable success because of her beauty. And one of the things about her beauty that made her so particularly striking, again, was her eyes. So there's this scene where um, you know, they're trying to get a man's attention. They're practicing getting a man's attention just by giving him a look. Well, you know, she gives a man a look and he falls right off his bicycle because those eyes are extremely striking. They're very difficult to ignore, especially if you live in a culture, in a part of the world where those eyes don't normally occur. And I thought, well, that's a really cool story, but that's fiction. If only we had something that was real. And I stumbled upon this video just a little while ago on YouTube. I was just kind of wandering around and I saw it and I was like, holy cow, this is it. And so I watched the interview with this woman. Her name, I'm going to butcher it. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. I'm very, very sorry. I'm not good with accents. Her name is Risikat Aziz. And she is, I believe, Nigerian. And you should take the time and watch the interview, because there are a few things you can notice just by watching the interview. And part of this is just camera angles, because they're trying, in the interview, they're trying to capture how visually different and how visually striking this woman is. But she is a young Nigerian woman who was born with blue eyes. And she got married and she had 2 kids, and both of her daughters also have the same blue eyes. She ended up having some marital problems. It's not entirely clear why her husband left her. There's some he said, she said going on there. But the thing that's interesting about that interview is the stories that she tells about her eyes and the way that people react to her eyes. And that's what I wanted to show you guys. That's what I really wanted to capture after reading this article by Peter Frost. This woman tells a story about how when she was first born, her eyes were blue, and her parents didn't really know what to do about that. They didn't know if it was a bad thing, and so they took her to the hospital, because nobody in that part of Nigeria was born with blue eyes. And so they took her to the hospital, and the doctors checked her eyes. Her eyes were perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with them. It was just a genetic mutation. And all the doctors thought that she was so pretty that they were actually like giving her gifts. She was getting gifts from the doctors because she was such a pretty little girl. She was so strikingly beautiful, so strikingly different and unique. And now, like, and I don't know the current state of her story, because I know it's kind of an evolving thing at this point in time. But after she and her husband parted ways, someone found her and did this interview with her and photographed her, like filmed her. And you can see her walking around in a group of other people, and she clearly just stands out. There's something very, very immediately striking about her visually. It's very distracting, for lack of a better word. And very, very beautiful. And the thing that was interesting was that some of the women who were interviewed in that film, they were talking about how they played with her daughters and took pictures with her daughters because their eyes were so unique and so striking that they're taking pictures of them. And they're talking about how just beautiful they are. Oh, they're so beautiful. And I thought that was fascinating, because the reaction that this woman has elicited just by this one genetic mutation that has altered her appearance, it's vast, it's huge. It's a huge and very positive reaction. And that's very interesting, because it goes back and it ties very neatly in with this paper that Peter Frost wrote. A genetic mutation for blue eyes, something that gives you a unique color, that makes you visually different and unique and striking, that can have a huge impact on a person's life, all other things being equal. And that's what you see with Risikat Aziz. All other things being equal, that one thing in her life makes her stand out, and it's changed her life. There are many beautiful women in Nigeria, But that one garners far more attention than any of them because she is outstandingly unique and outstandingly strikingly visually different. And so you take that information, and it would be very, very easy, and I'm afraid that people will do this, so please don't do this. Do not assume, okay, so blue eyes are just better than brown ones. And that's the wrong, it's an oversimplistic assumption to make, and it's not the correct assumption to make. The idea is not simply to have blue eyes. And this is something Peter Frost goes into further in his article. It's not just the blue eyes. The blue eyes is the immediate physical manifestation. But that's not the point. That's not what's really giving an individual the advantage. The advantage comes in being unique, different, and visually striking. That's the advantage. That's the point. And so at one point in his article, he compares two pictures. One of them is of a variety of eye colors, like just a wide variety of eye colors. Some dark brown, some light brown, some hazel, some green, some pale blue, some dark blue, some purple. Just all these different eye colors. And he shows that, just these eye colors, next to a picture of a bunch of guppies, male guppies. And they were all fished out of a stream at the same time. You know, same day, all male guppies, fished out of the same spot in the same stream. And all of these guppies are different colors and different patterns, and they're all bright and colorful and eye-catching. The goal is not simply to have blue eyes. It's not some shade of eye color that makes you unique and striking and different. It's being unique and striking and different. So if you listen to Rollo Tomassi, he says this a lot. Attention is the coin of the realm in girl world. And a lot of guys who are into pickup artistry and stuff like that, they play with that. They play with giving women attention. You give her attention when she's doing things you like, and you take away attention when she's doing things you don't like. You know, they talk about that. It's manipulative, honestly. It's kind of a douchebaggy thing to do, but they talk about that like they're being clever and like they're somehow controlling a situation. What they don't realize is attention is the coin of the realm in girl world, because the girl who can generate the most attention gets to be with Chad. She gets to pick the best mate. She gets to garner the best mate for herself. She changes her life circumstances, all other things being equal, considerably. And it is a beneficial change most of the time. So if she's a uniquely striking, visually very different and pretty young girl, you know, in the case of Risikat Aziz, the doctors were giving her presents because she was so beautiful. Imagine being in a harsh, inhospitable environment and getting presents and gifts from people because you're so strikingly beautiful. Imagine the kind of massive impact that would have on your chances for survival. And so that's why these blue eyes developed, or at least that's what Peter Frost says is why blue eyes developed. And honestly, I'm inclined to believe him. I'm inclined to think that this is in fact the case. Being as visually striking and unique as possible altered the lives of countless women over countless generations, because you had to be that much more than all the women around you in order to win the game of life, in order to get that good hunter who wasn't going to end up dying in the next hunt, who wasn't going to come home without any food and let you starve to death or let the kids starve to death. That's the desirable mate, and there weren't many of him. And so whatever a woman had to get her a mate, whatever she had to make herself more appealing, more striking, and this is something, I mean, it's not a specific eye color, it's not a specific hair color, and it's not a specific race either. It's all human features, I think, especially facial features. You know, Why do Asian people have a golden undertone to their skin? How does that benefit them on a biological level? Why was that selected for? Maybe there's a really good practical reason. Maybe it's like, well, these guys lived and those guys over there died, and so these guys are the ones who survived. But there is a sexual selection element to these things. Maybe not all of these things, maybe not all visual things about a human being, but some of them. And it's many details. It's many things. It's the shape of the eyes. It's not just the color, but the shape. Does the shape really affect anything? But, different races have different eye shapes. It doesn't matter what your race is. That's not the point. That's not the point to take away from this. What you can take away from this is that human beings select other human beings when they choose a mate, when they choose to partner with someone. And they're selecting for a multitude of features, and because men are primarily visually aroused, they're going to select for visual cues. And they're going to select for visual cues of beauty because beauty indicates health and fertility. And so they're going to look at women who are beautiful and they see, okay, these things are beautiful. She's beautiful. Next generation comes, well, she's beautiful. Next generation, well, she's beautiful. Men have sculpted and molded what women look like thus far. And the end result is women who are not simply beautiful, because simply being beautiful isn't enough. We have to be absolutely striking. We have to be stunningly beautiful. We have to be so unique and showy and vibrant that we capture your attention and we hold it. And I mean, this is why sometimes when you see a pretty girl, you feel like you can't breathe. It's like, so many countless generations of women, we've really fine-tuned the art of being absolutely stunning. Because those of us who weren't, they're not there anymore. They're gone. And this is something that was put into hyperdrive, I think, and this is what Peter Frost is saying. This was something that was put in, please tell me it's Peter Frost. Like, it says Peter Frost in the article. If it's Dr. Peter Frost, I'm very sorry. But this was something that was put into hyperdrive in Northern Europe. And that's what he's saying. Like, it was so incredibly, ruthlessly, mercilessly competitive that only the women who were extremely eye-catching, extremely to the point of being freakishly different, having genetic mutations that altered coloration. That's very different. That's very unusual. These are very rare traits. And the fact that these very rare, very recessive traits became so prevalent means that only the women who were extremely eye-catching, extremely beautiful, they were the only ones who managed to live and produce viable offspring. And it's not saying, I don't want anyone to take this as some sort of, well, Europeans are more evolved or any shit like that. Please don't. What I'm saying is, it gives us a window into human sexual selection as a whole. We select for things that we find absolutely beautiful. We select for the very best that we see around us. And that very best is going to take many forms. And it makes me wonder about the future of humanity. People talk about the globalization of the human race and what that's going to look like, and they envision a race of people who all have brown hair and they all have brown eyes and they all look the same. And I don't know if that's actually correct. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if that's a realistic thing to expect. I mean, maybe it is, and you would want to look at somebody who's an anthropologist or a geneticist. They'd probably have a more accurate idea of how that all works. But the idea that humans are all going to look the same if we just mash them all together enough I don't think that's necessarily realistic. Because when it comes to the sexual selection of females, at least, it seems that the woman who looks different than everybody else has a leg up on everyone else. And so there's always going to be this competition to be the most unique, the most different, the most eye-catching. And so there's always going to be that. And you see it globally with humans. That's another thing. It's not just skin color or eye color or hair texture even. It's makeup, it's clothing, it's bodily adornment. Humans are always putting colors all over themselves. If you look at tribal clothing throughout the world, you know, historical tribal clothing of any group, anywhere in the world, you're always going to see bright colors, strikingly bright dyes, you know, red dye on the cloth, or really bright patterns of blue and red, or very vibrant bird feathers. You're going to see that. Colorful stones that are sparkling and attention grabbing. And in modern makeup, I mean, now that we've got, you know, chemistry, you know, it's funny to me because there's so many dating coaches out there who are like, you know, watch out for women with purple hair or red hair or green hair, you know, out in the wild. That's how animals signal to others that they're poisonous and dangerous. It's like, well, yes, they do. But in the case of humans, it's a way of making yourself stand out. It's a way of attracting sexual attention, honestly. Which I don't think that women who have like blue hair and are really super angry feminists are trying to attract sexual attention. But they are probably trying to make themselves look good. And looking good, it's not a conscious attempt to attract sexual attention. But everybody wants to look good, virtually everybody. And everybody wants to look good without understanding, I think, that looking good is a way to signal your sexual status and health to the tribe around you, the social network around you. And so, you know, it doesn't matter if you're trying to look sexy. That's not the point. The point is to prove that you are capable of being sexy, that you are capable of being fertile, that you are capable of being healthy, and that that's part of who you are. And so it's interesting. Like, it is subconscious. Like, please don't read into other people's behavior and be like, you're trying to look sexy. It's like, no, that's not the point. The point is that all humans are subconsciously driven to show off these indicators of health, which is closely related to fertility, because that affects our social status within the social group. It's important, and so we have to do it. We're driven to do it. Says the gal who's wearing black and gray for the millionth time in her videos. But yeah, I think that's mostly it. I'm gonna finish this up, and I'm gonna try and edit it and get it done tonight. I've been really, really tired lately, and hopefully I covered everything. There was so much in that article. Like, it's such a fascinating idea. And even if it's not, even if, you know, standard scientific knowledge is like, okay, we heard that, it was kind of funny and it kind of interesting, but we don't agree with that. Even if the standard scientific understanding is not in agreement with this, it's still such a poignant idea. And it says so much about human sexual selection that I really wanted to share it with you guys, because even if that's not the case, it's true of humans that they do this. So even if that's not how blue eyes, green eyes, red hair, blonde hair, how all these things came about, even if that's not how it happened, it's illustrative of human nature. And so it is, I think, at the very least, worth discussing. And also the interview with Risikat Aziz. Just the way people react to her and the very positive nature of the reaction she gets. And that's important too. She's not a white woman. She's a black woman. She's very clearly a black woman. This isn't about any specific race or racial identity. It's about being that little extra step up than the women around you. And if you have that little extra edge, and this is something we see all throughout evolution, all throughout evolution, if an individual of any species has an advantageous mutation, that's going to help them, all other things being equal, to do far better than they would otherwise. And then usually that individual is biologically successful because they've done better than otherwise. Usually these mutations that you look at, the mutations we hear about, are things like being better at evading predators or being better at getting food. But, you know, it could be better at attracting a mate. That's how birds get their vibrant plumage. It's better at attracting a mate. It's a way of signaling to a mate and getting her attention. And in the case of the guppies, it's really, really interesting because they're all different colors and they're all different patterns and they're all attempting to be the most colorful and the most unique and the most eye-catching so that they can get mates. And that's what it all boils down to. It's about being extraordinarily eye-catching in such a way that you can obtain an ideal mate. So, if you guys have the time, definitely read that article, watch that interview. They're very interesting. They're very thought-provoking. And I will talk to you guys later.